Okay. Vela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. This is the Chronicles of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram Holis Yitzchak. Avram fathered Yitzchak. So there's the obvious question. If Yitzchak's ben Avraham, Yitzchak's the son of Avram, it's obvious Avram fathered Yitzchak. So why is this considered superfluous? Vela told us Yitzchak, Yaakov Esav Mur Beparsha. And what exactly is Rashi saying? That who are the children of Yitzchak, Yaakov and Esav, which are stated. I mean, I would have thought, for instance, when we speak about the Toldos, the children of, in the context of Toldos, Avram, who was Avram's child? Yitzchak, not Yishmael. I mean, it's not even considered that he would be the one to be considered the Chronicles of Yitzchak, of Avram. So maybe Esav, who definitely is the antithesis of what his father was, maybe he shouldn't be considered the Toldos of Yitzchak. Although we speak about Esav, how in Yitro there was the thrashing within Rivka's womb, but the Toldos, in terms of the one who had meaning or value, it's Yaakov, not Esav. But we see it's now that since Esav's role in existence is essential, because if Yaakov doesn't meet the grade and fails to any degree, Esav has the upper hand. Esav is the counterbalance to Yaakov. Therefore, it's the Toldos. When Yitzchak fathered these two children, they are his chronicles. Even though the one who's the heir apparent is Yaakov, but in terms of Toldos, what was brought into being, Esav was essential as Yaakov. Yishmael had nothing to do with Yitzchak. It was a separate nation. But here, each one is intricately entwined with the other, and when one goes off balance, the other one is elevated. As we'll see later with the bracha which Yitzchak had given, that when Esav has a claim for the Bechorah, and Yaakov does not pull his weight, then Esav has the upper hand, which we'll see later. Therefore, it tells us Tolas Yitzchak, it's Esav, Yaakov and Esav. Avram Holedis Yitzchak. Sarmach la'ache shekora kodesh baruch hu shmo Avram. Acha kach Holedis Yitzchak. The Midrash. If we just say Yitzchak ben Avram, he's ben Avram. What the Torah is telling us, he was only able to father Yitzchak only once he became Avraham. When he became Avraham, only then, which was the time in the bris at the circumcision, then he was able to father Yitzchak. I pointed out every one of the Avos HaKadoshim, the patriarchs, who named them. Yitzchak was named by Hashem. That name, when Hashem had told Avram he's going to have a son, he says his name will be Yitzchak. And when we read this parsha, and he was called Yaakov, Rashi cites the Chazal, who called Yaakov Yaakov? Hashem called Yaakov. His parents did not give him that name. Now, who brought about the name change Avram to Avraham? Hashem says, you will no longer be called Avram, you're Avraham. So he said it's basically the same name. You added a hey. It's not the same. Avraham. If you remember, we mentioned the Medrash at the time of creation, at the completion of creation, it says Bihi Baram. When he created them. So the Medrash tells us Bihi Baram, Osius Avraham. The word Bihi Baram, when he created them, those letters are the letters of Avraham. If you conjugate the letters, it spells Avraham. What does that mean? So the Maral explains what the Chazal are telling us, that Medrash, Bihi Baram, Osius Avraham, that Avram is not a continuation of the previous creation. When Avram became Avram, he's a new creation. Although physically he's the same human being, but in terms of his dimension of being, his dimension has no relevance to anything that preceded him. Therefore, he's the beginning. So when Hashem says, now you be Avraham, there's like a new being being created, and he named him Avraham. So every one of the Avos HaKadoshim were named by Hashem, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Because this is another level. This has no relevance to the physical existence. Every other name, Adam Arishan. Who named Adam? Adam? Hashem named Adam. Because he was meant to be that, to address the spiritual objective of existence. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they are the ones where their domain now is the spiritual existence. They will meet the objective of creation. Therefore, Avraham is named by Hashem, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they're all named by Hashem. That is the foundation of the Klal Yisrael. That's the understanding. So Avraham holded Yitzchak. Until he became Avraham, he could not father Yitzchak. Because Yitzchak had to be part of a new existence. Therefore, Avraham had to be the beginning of a new creation. And that's why until that moment, until he was circumcised, he wasn't able to father that child. Especially if you go with the Zohar, we always mention that Adam was created without a foreskin. Until that evil, that representation of evil was removed from him, he couldn't father the patriarch. Because Klal Yisrael, from our very inception, could not have relevance to the Ra, the original Ra, which took the existence down. This is the beginning of new existence. Because only Avraham at that age did he reach a level of development that he was at a position to become a new existence at the age of 99. So therefore it's Avraham Holetz Yitzchak. That's why it's not superfluous. You'd say Yitzchak ben Avraham, that was his name? No, it was Avraham Holetz. Only when he became Avraham was he able to father Yitzchak. Adam initially was created pure. He had no evil in him. Only when he ate of the Eitz Hadas, which the Torah depicts as Tov Ra, did he allow that evil to intermingle in his being. Okay? Avraham, when he removed the foreskin, he minimized that effect, or the majority of the effect. The reason why we're able to have endlessly more obligations than a non-Jew, the Gemara says in Shabbos, it's explicit, that at Sinai, it was Poskuzu Mosam. That we were exposed to the Hashem's presence, the intensity of his presence that vaporized that evil which we had within us. We were still part of humanity. Our physicality is still part of humanity. And because it was minimized to a point, therefore we have control over ourselves. We could meet challenges which a non-Jew cannot meet. Because we have a different capacity. The non-Jew, where his soul is totally impeded by the evil, his challenges are limited. Do you violate the 7 Noahide laws or not? Negative commandments. Don't cross lines. With us, it's more than not crossing lines. We have 248 positive commandments with all their subcategories. In addition, we have 365 negative commandments. It goes beyond the 7 Noahide laws. We have so many more because our spiritual makeup is a different dimension. Therefore, we can contend with all these issues. And we have the capacity to deal with them and perfect ourselves, which is not Jew. It's beyond his capacity. Therefore, he's limited to the 7 Noahide laws. The evolution of this, the foundation, as I said, the 3 Avos, they are the foundation. Adam initially would have been the foundation of all humanity in terms of the spiritual foundation. But because he had ingested the fruit, he allowed that evil to be in him, he was disqualified. Avram was the beginning of the evolution. It evolved with Avram, and it culminated the foundation with Yaakov. Yaakov no longer, he purged that evil totally. Now he was able, the foundation is secure, now we could build the Jewish people. And therefore, Yaakov is the one who fathered the 12 tribes. So they're all part of the same securing the foundation for the future. It started with Avram. So Avram said, the Gemara says, Avram had Yishmael because he wasn't fully purged. Yitzchak had Esau because he wasn't fully purged. Yaakov, that he fully expunged that evil from him. But we all have some degree. We still have the Yetzer Hara. We still have an evil inclination. But in terms of building that spiritual edifice, which is eternal, that only could happen after Yaakov. The 2 previous Avos, they weren't there yet. he was able to achieve that level of perfection that the foundation was secure. The whole concept, when Eliezer, remember we had yesterday, we had read that Eliezer, when he went to find a wife and negotiate the wife for Yitzhak, it's interesting. He asked Avram a question, Ulai lo sova isha lechas achroi. Ulai, maybe the woman's not going to want to return with me. So Rashi says, Bas hoyo Eliezer. Eliezer had a daughter who was very special. It was a holy woman, tzadekis. And he didn't understand, why you send me to the other end of the world to find a wife, Yitzhak? My daughter is seemingly disqualified. So what was the basis for the ulai? So the word ulai is written choser, is written with the vav deleted, to allude that the reason why Eliezer asked the question, because he had a conflict of interest. He says to Avram, why not Eli? So the ulai was based on the Eli, because he had a daughter. Okay? So what did Avram answer? Eliezer, Ata Oro Vadi Baruch. You come from cursed stock, you come from Chum, where he was cursed by Noach. I come from blessed stock, I come from Shem. Vein Or Bistapik Baruch. And something of cursed stock cannot attach itself to blessed, meaning to create this eternal edifice, which is called Klal Yisrael, the foundation has to be secure. And if in the basis in the foundation, if you have Oror cannot will not allow this to evolve into this eternal entity. Therefore, it's a no-go. All the matriarchs were from Avram's family. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and the Balakshir, and the concubines. They were all Lavan's children. That's all Avram's family. It's all Baruch. But Yaakov was the conclusion of laying that foundation, and Yaakov being the one of total purity, it was secure, and now he was the one who fathered the 12 tribes.
So the reason, notwithstanding the fact he was told to leave Abraham, because I guess as I recall in Lech Lecha, Hashem said, there's no hope for these people. You need to go, you need to leave them. It's a stock issue as opposed to because he was told to leave because Hashem said it's a futile pursuit.
Your initiatives are futile here. You will not be effective. You want to be effective, you go to the land that I will show you.
So it was merely a sort of genetic stock, if you will, or genealogical stock that he needed to send Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzhak back there. Correct.
The people we converted to monotheism, they have nothing to do with the Jewish people. There were Nohites who he brought them to the truth of monotheism. But that was part of his development himself. By engaging in that initiative of introducing the world to God, that was part of his initiative. That was part of his process to achieve that perfection within himself. And as meeting the 10 tests, the 10 tests which he was tested about. That was part of his personal development. Okay. So that's the first interpretation. Avram Holitzi Yitzhak. Because only once he became Avram was he able to father the patriarch. Davar Acher. Another interpretation, Al Deshe Kosov, HaKosov Yitzhak ben Avram, Huskich Lomar, Avram Holitzi Yitzhak. Since it says that Yitzhak was the son of Avram, the term must tell us that Avram definitely fathered Yitzhak. Why? Because the deprecators of the generation were saying that who fathered Yitzhak? It was Avimelech. She was impregnated by Avimelech. Why? Many years she was together with Avram. She never conceived, never became pregnant. So all of a sudden now she it's noticeably she's pregnant. Evidently, people will say that maybe the pedigree of Yitzhak is Avimelech. So he developed the facial features of Yitzhak were identical to Avram. Ve'idu hakol Avram Yitzhak. So when you saw Yitzhak, there was no question in anybody's mind who fathered Yitzhak. Avram Yitzhak. That was the confirmation, and that dispelled any question to the pedigree of Yitzchok. So Shekosov Khan, Yitzchok ben Avram. How do we know Yitzchok was the son of Avram? Sharek Edus Yesh Avram Holis Yitzchok, because we have irrefutable testimony that Avram Holis Yitzchok, because the facial features of Yitzchok were identical to his father. See, the Sephardo says something very interesting here. I'd mentioned, Rashi says, in terms of the Chronicles of Yitzchok, it's Yaakov Esav. Even though Yishmael is not the toldest of Avram, even though he's his progeny. When we speak about the Toldos, the Chronicles, it's what? It's Yitzchok, not Yishmael. But here, Esav, although he was a representation of evil, he still told us Yitzchok because he's integral to the objective of Yaakov because he's the counterbalance. But you'd say if that's the case, maybe Esav is what? Is also the primary progeny of Yitzchok, of Avram. So if you take a look at the Sephardi, he says, Avram Holis Yitzchok, Bo Levado Nikra Avram Zela. If you remember, HaKadosh Baruch says to Avram, Ki Bi Yitzchok, Yikor Chozara. Bi Yitzchok v'lo kol Yitzchok. Among Yitzchok's progeny will be called Zerah, than all the progeny of Yitzchok. Esav is not called Zerah. He's not the seed, meaning to be reckoned with as the seed in terms of pedigree. Esav's not the pedigree of Yitzchok. So in terms of Chronicles, it's Yaakov Esav. Because Esav's integral, he's the counterbalance of Yaakov. But in terms of when it concludes Avram Holis Yitzchok, but who was the son of Yitzchok in terms of pedigree? The heir apparent, it was Yitzchok, not anybody else, not Yishmael. This is not Yishmael. We mentioned last week, that the first one to age in the history of the world was Avram Avinu. Right? Vahi Avram Zoki Bo Bayomin. In last week's reading. Why did he have to age? Until then, aging didn't exist because people, this Rashi, which Rashi cites the Chazal, because the deprecated generation said that Yitzchok was not fathered by Avram Avinu, but it was by Avimelech. So to counter that point, that it should be clear beyond any doubt, Yitzchok looked exactly like his father. So that we have a problem. Avram says, how does one discern between himself and Yitzchok? So it says that night Yitzchok went to sleep. Avram went to sleep. He woke up. He turned gray. His beard, his hair was gray. So people now were able to differentiate between Avram and Yitzchok. That's why Zikna aging process was introduced. Okay? But if not for this, there'd be no reason. Because people wouldn't confuse the two. Okay? We find that initially when we left Egypt, we went to Kabbalah Satorah, and the Torah speaks about the 12 tribes, and they're mentioned how many members of each tribe, in terms of the encampment, how they traveled. The Torah does not attest to the pedigree of the Jewish people. Does not attest to it. It says The first camp that traveled. Second, no mention, confirming their pedigree. A Kabbalah Torah. The nations of the world said, why don't you give us the Torah? According to the Medrash. So Hashem said, my children, they're all purebreds. You people, you're all products of incest and adultery. Therefore, you don't meet the grade. Therefore, you're not qualified to receive the Torah. So the Medrash quotes the pasuk from Mishlei, Komu Vaneva Yashua. The nations that were astounded when Hashem said, because the Jews are pure, they're not pure, they were astounded. The Jews themselves never ever crossed those lines to commit adultery or incest. But yet later, we find Hashem has to attest the purity, to the pedigree of every one of the tribes. Hachanochi, Hapalui, every one of them. Yud-Kei. Yud-Kei attests to the purity. Why? Because they could say, there's a Kal V'chomer, if they controlled their lives, their physical lives, their bodies, they killed them, they tortured them, enslaved them. Don't you think they dominated their women and they defiled them? So therefore Hashem says, Hachanochi. I attest, Yud-Kei, I attest to the purity that they're from their project, their genealogies from the paternal line of Jews, they're not Egyptians. We had said initially, God doesn't have to attest. Later, God does attest. The first time they're counted, there's no mention. Each tribe is mentioned by its name. There's no Chanochi Hapalui. They're mentioned just by the families. What changed from the first time to the second time? Alan, we asked this question. Alan is saying Tillim. Okay, he's distracted. Okay. Alan, do you remember what we said?
Okay.
Remember what we said?
Hmm.
What transpired between the first time and second time was the Baal Peor. The Baal Peor. Because the Jews failed with Baal Peor and they crossed that line, when they compromised their spiritual purity being involved, now the question arises. Until then, there was an aura. The Jews are on a pedestal. They have no relevance to this. Once the Jews themselves, they fell into this abyss of this impurity, now we have a question. It's not so simple. Because the Jews don't have that spiritual, so-called aura. We see they compromised it. Maybe in Egypt, they didn't have that spiritual, that divine protection, that their wives should be protected from the Egyptians, as we see now. On that, Hashem says, I attest, even though this group failed, they were all destroyed in the plague, because they said, the Medrash says, the Umas Olam nation would come to Hashem and says, why don't you give us the Torah now? They're not as pure as we are. They're no more pure than we are. Hashem says, no, whoever crossed those lines, they will perish in the plague. So what's the Jews that are left, they're all pure. But the question arose, because the question arose, Hashem had to attest to the fact. But before they failed, we don't have to test. But what the world may say, it's irrelevant what the world says. Because it's evident the Jews have no relevance to that. But once it's not so evident, God has to attest to it. So my question is, Avram Avinu and Sarah Imeinu, she rated in holiness. And yet Hashem had to bring about a miracle that Yitzchak looked exact like his father. Because we're concerned what the world says. But why would the world say it? Until the Jews failed with Baal Peor, nobody said anything. Nobody would consider saying it. So why over here would people say that Sarah Imeinu and Avram Avinu, that the child of Sarah is from Avimelech? Why wasn't there the same aura, so to say, that no one would even consider it? So you could the friendship, because here factually he did sequester himself with her. He secluded with her. And after that one night, all of a sudden she's pregnant. So here what we call the reyusa. There's a breach of that presumptive status, because here something happened, and then we see a change in her. She's pregnant. In Egypt, we don't find ever that a Jewish woman secluded herself with an Egyptian man. So here, there's what to ask. There's no what, and that's the simple answer I would give. The other answer I would say, that Hashem performed miracles. He took us out of Egypt. We had the Esamakos. Egypt, the height of civilization, was destroyed. if the progeny of the Jews, the paternal line are Egyptians, you understand? God is not doing this for the Egyptians. Because the paternal line is identified, a child is identified by the paternal line. So if these are Egyptians, do you think God is destroying Egypt to take out the Egyptians from Egypt? Evidently, these are not Egyptians. These are Jews. So there's no question. We don't question their pedigree. It's clear. Just as they merited these miracles because they are the children of the original Jews who came to Egypt, identically, they weren't defined for the same reason. It was a miracle. God deals with Jewish people on a supernatural level. But with Avraham Avinu, we don't see that. As a result of that, there's a basis to ask a question. Maybe the one who fathered Yitzchak is what? Is Avimelech. Therefore, God had to bring about this miracle that Yitzchak looked exactly like Avraham Avinu.
Rabbi?
Why did Hashem allow Sarah to be taken by this monster? Such a holy woman. And then afterwards, people should even consider saying that he impregnated her. Such a holy woman. And then he had to perform a miracle that Yitzchak looks like Avram. And then the aging process had to be introduced. To differentiate between Yitzchak and Avram because they looked identically the same. The whole thing could have been avoided. Avimelech should have never been attracted to her. He should have never taken her, and that would have been the end of the story. Like we find with Yitzchak and Rivka. Same story with Avimelech. Initially, he introduced Rivka as a sister, and then he saw the relationship between the two of them. He understood they're man and wife. And he says, the king nearly violated adultery because of you. But it never happened. Says it didn't happen by Yitzchak and Rivka. Hashem could have prevented it happening by Avram and Sarah. But Hashem allowed it. Why did Hashem allow it? And then he had to perform this miracle. And by Rivka and Yitzchak, he did not allow it. He had said that the day that Avram died, Nimrod was killed. Why was Nimrod and Avram, the one who had thrown Avram into the Kivsh nation, the kiln, the day that he was taken, he was killed by Esav, Avram passed away on that same day. So we explained that who is the counterbalance to Avram? The counterbalance to Avram was Nimrod. The world cannot have an Avram without a Nimrod. Why? Because it offsets the counterbalance. You have to have evil to counter the good. Otherwise, the concept of Bechira, a free choice, is not in place. So if Nimrod is taken, Avram has to be taken. That's the understanding. If Yitzchak looks identically as his father looks, and the aging process is not in effect, what are people going to say? Even if Avram passes away, this is Avram. As a result of that, the impact he has on humanity, just as being, he's undermining the context of Bechira. So what happens? Hashem allows Yitzchak, Sarah, to be taken. This to assure that there should be Bechira. As a result of that, now she has a child. Now, but we have a question. Is it Avimelech's child or is it Avram's child? He's more with identical features as his father. Okay? But now what happens? People still will say, so if he looks identical now, Avram passes away. People say it's Avram, right? But the moment you have a situation where the question is asked, even with all the answers, the answer is not 100% answer. Because people say, it's true, he looks like his father, but you never know. So as much as Yitzchak looks like Avram, he definitely fathered him. That's the reality. But what about what people have to say? People say, but you never know. So the level of representation of good that Avram had, Yitzchak doesn't have that same representation of good. Of course, you still could ask the question. And the expression I used, that when you throw enough dirt, enough mud, you can't clean up. As much as you clean up, you never could clean up. The moment that question is asked, you have an answer, but you still have a question. But why only then did it happen? Why not before? But it can't be because he looks like his father. It doesn't make a difference. So that's the reason why Hashem allowed this to happen, to secure the context of Bechira in existence for that reason. Now we have a new problem. If Avram looks like Yitzchok, so Avram says to Hashem, when people approach me, they say, Master Yitzchok, not Master Avram. As long as Avram was alive, he had to be recognized as Avram. Because he still, until Yitzchok became the patriarch, Avram and Nimrod was alive, he had to be recognized as Avram. That he is Avram to counter the Nimrod. Therefore, Hashem had to introduce aging that people could discern between Avram and Yitzchok for that reason.
Rabbi,